tornadoes and earthworms as universal symbols. It's symbols for the universe. Now, what do tornadoes and earthworms have in common, you might ask? They're toroidal tubular vortices. Okay, so first, an earthworm. From an earthworm's perspective, on an earthworm's level, as an earthworm, I am moving through the universe as I move the universe through me. Earthworms are very important for the terrestrial sphere, the health of the soil. So they live in the soil, and they move through the soil. They're kind of burrowing through it. And as they're burrowing through it, they're tubular, so the soil moves through them as they move through the soil. It's pretty trippy. But a tornado has the same kind of shape. It's more of a funnel, but it still has an inside and an outside, so to speak, and it still moves through the atmosphere as it moves the atmosphere through itself. So it's kind of like a tornado is the atmospheric manifestation of the soil manifestation, which is the earthworm. Now, how are these symbols of the universe? Well, is that not what the universe does? So let's talk a little bit more about tornadoes, because they're very scary, aren't they? I mean, they can be deadly, they can be devastating, but they're a force of nature, so make no mistake that the laws of physics generates tornadoes the same way that the laws of physics generates earthworms, which is the same way that the laws of physics generates human beings, by the way. So we have this energy within us, and that energy compounds, okay? But what is that energy? Okay, well, it's the masculine and feminine principles from an occult science perspective. If you study the Cosmic History Chronicles, that's probably the most comprehensive overview of occult history. Volume 4 specifically. So what are these masculine and feminine principles? Let's look at tornadoes. Okay, so tornadoes, like earthworms, suck the universe into themselves. So they're sucking the atmosphere in, right? Because all that hot air is rising up under the pressure of the cold air and all that. So they're sucking the atmosphere in at the base and pushing it out at the top. So in hurricanes, which are similar to tornadoes, you have what's called the eye of the storm. I mean, you have the same thing in tornadoes, but it's more commonly thought of as being a hurricane type of term. So the eye of the storm is where there's stillness. And you get that before a tornado manifests as well. You get that eerie calm. This is like a static distension in the atmosphere, which is interesting because what you have is that force, which is stillness, and is the aspect of the universe which is never changing. And then you have the wind aspect of the universe, which is ever changing. And when you put those two forces together, they become insanely, exponentially more powerful. And we have this power within us. But see, here's the thing. Going with the gravity requires surrender. Because your mind, the human mind, is part of all mind. And it can become swept up in the spirals, okay, in these vortices. So how do we think about this as human beings? How do we tap into these natural forces? So since the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that means that as human beings, as storytellers, in living life, we're hardwired for journeys. And what does it mean to go on a journey? To go on a journey is to move through the universe as the universe moves through you. And that's what I call navigation. That's a honing mechanism. And it's the most critical interval of consciousness that I have found. And I think if the physical universe is reducible to vibrating strings, and that vibrating strings are energy, and that energy is consciousness, and that the most irreducible unit of consciousness is the journey, then earthworms and tornadoes are both really good symbols for that. A tornado might not seem to be the most obvious manifestation of gravity. But it is inclined enough. And this is how humans fly airplanes.